Something here doesn't add up. The lights were already fading, and the crowd believed they knew what would happen next. Another song, another performance, another predictable ending. But that night at the CxM concert refused to follow the usual script. Nothing about it felt forced or dramatic at first. No sudden announcement, no grand introduction. Yet the moment unfolded in a way that made people pause. Because what happened didn't feel accidental. What you're about to hear changes everything. Not because it was loud, but because it was quiet. Not because it demanded attention, but because it earned it. And once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Jungkook appeared without warning. No spotlight chasing him, no build-up to his presence. He was simply there, calm and composed. And the energy in the room shifted instantly. Across the stage stood Minghao. Focused, grounded, fully in his element. When he turned and saw Jungkook, there was no shock. Only recognition. That single exchange said more than words ever could. No exaggerated reactions, no hesitation. Just a shared understanding between two artists. And fans felt it immediately. People replayed the footage again and again. Not searching for dialogue, but for meaning. Because the silence between them felt intentional. And intention is never random on a stage like this. Online discussions erupted within minutes. Some called it coincidence, others a surprise crossover. But those watching closely noticed something different. They noticed comfort. Jungkook didn't look like a guest intruding on someone else's space. Minghao didn't look like a host caught off guard. They moved naturally, adjusting without breaking rhythm. As if this moment had existed long before the audience saw it. But that wasn't the end. Because the real story wasn't in the performance itself. It was in the details surrounding it. Details most people almost missed. Idol stages don't leave room for accidents. Every second is timed, every appearance approved. So when something feels unplanned, it usually means the planning happened quietly. Long before the lights turned on. Fans began connecting old dots. Past events, brief encounters, moments that once felt insignificant. Nothing confirmed, nothing obvious. Just enough to suggest mutual respect. As the concert continued, the crowd grew quieter. Not because they were bored, but because they were watching. Every glance now felt meaningful. Every movement carried weight. This wasn't about shipping or rivalry. It wasn't about headlines or competition. It was about recognition between artists. And recognition doesn't need explanation. Backstage moments later reinforced that feeling. No chaos, no exaggerated reactions. Just calm conversations and subtle smiles. As if this was never meant to shock anyone. Now everything makes sense. If this were a publicity move, it would have been louder. There would have been teasers and announcements. Instead, it passed quietly through the moment. Jungkook has always chosen authenticity over spectacle. Minghao has always moved with intention and control. When those values meet, the result isn't noise. It's clarity. That's why fans didn't feel confused. They felt emotional. Because they recognized something genuine. Something rare. In an industry built on constant attention, this moment stood out by doing the opposite. It didn't demand to be remembered. It simply existed. And that's why it stayed. Hours later, clips spread everywhere. But the most replayed parts weren't the obvious ones. They were the quiet pauses and subtle gestures. Proof that meaning doesn't need volume. The truth didn't need noise. It only needed time. Because looking back now, that night feels different. Less like a surprise, and more like a moment we were lucky to witness. Because moments like this don't age quickly. They grow stronger with distance. What felt confusing at first begins to look intentional. And what looked small begins to feel significant. Fans started asking a different question. Not, why did this happen? But, why did it feel so right? That question lingered longer than any rumor. The answer wasn't hidden in statements or press releases. It was hidden in posture. In timing. In the absence of surprise. When artists share a stage without tension, it reveals trust. Trust built through time, not headlines. And trust like that doesn't come from coincidence. It comes from understanding. This is why the moment refused to fade. Because it wasn't designed to impress. It wasn't chasing validation. It existed on its own terms. As days passed, reactions became quieter. Less speculation, more reflection. Fans stopped asking for explanations. They started accepting the moment as it was. And that's when its meaning deepened. Because in an industry driven by constant visibility, choosing subtlety is a statement. Choosing silence is a form of confidence. And confidence doesn't need approval. Jungkook didn't step on that stage to prove anything. Minghao didn't need to acknowledge it publicly. Their presence alone was enough. And sometimes, presence speaks loudest. This wasn't about stealing attention. It was about sharing space. Two artists existing side by side without competition. Without comparison. That's rare. Most stages are built on contrast. One shines brighter, one steps back. But here, balance was the point. And balance is hard to fake. Fans noticed how nothing felt rushed. No awkward timing. No forced transitions. Everything flowed. Flow like that comes from preparation. Not rehearsals, but awareness. Awareness of each other's rhythm. Awareness of the moment. And that's why the clip kept circulating. Not because it was shocking. But because it was calm. Calm in a world addicted to chaos. Eventually, people stopped labeling it. Stopped trying to define what it meant. They let it exist as a shared memory. And that's when it became powerful. Because not every moment needs a name. Some moments are meant to be felt. Meant to linger quietly. Meant to remind us why we watch in the first place. This wasn't a turning point. It wasn't a beginning or an ending. It was a pause. And pauses are often where truth lives. Looking back, the signs were always there. In mutual respect. In artistic restraint. In silence that felt intentional. Time didn't weaken the moment. It clarified it. It stripped away noise and speculation. Leaving only what mattered. And what mattered was simple. Two artists shared a space honestly. No agenda. No performance beyond the performance itself. That's why the memory holds. Because authenticity doesn't expire. It doesn't rely on context. It just remains. In the end, the moment didn't change careers. It didn't rewrite narratives. It did something quieter. It reminded people why sincerity stands out. The truth didn't need noise. It only needed time. And now, with distance, the picture is clear. That night wasn't about surprise. It was about presence.